My name is Harper Case. I am a youth representative of All the World's a Stage. We teach life skills through theater arts. I'd like to introduce the Center for Story-Based Strategy. I'm personally excited for this because I do come from a theater background, and I'm kind of excited to see what story-based things we could be learning today. I'd like to hand it off to Christine. So, thank you.
Thank you, Harper.
Woo.
Thank you. So Harper is and her organization are one of the many amazing organizations that have been grantees of the Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan. I want to thank the foundation as well as the Johnson Center and you all for having us here today. We are excited to be here with you all. Again, my name is Christine Cordero. I'm with the Center for Story-Based Strategy. I'm the National Training Program Director, and our team today is...
I'm Kiara Nagel, and I'm an associate with the Center for Story-Based Strategy. And I actually come from youth organizing, so we were really excited to come and work in this Detroit region, which we love so much, and work with young people and people who work with young people, because we think that's really important. So we're really honored to be here with you all today.
I'm Chris Lagunas. I live in Boston, and I'm also an associate with CSS, and I come out of the DREAM Act movement, from doing work with undocumented young people, being an undocumented young person at some point, and I'm just real excited to be here and just be in a youth space, because I know it's gonna be fun as heck.
So we are your tour guides for today through Story-Based Strategy. Center for Story-Based Strategy is a 10-year-old organization, and basically what we do is we try to connect folks that are doing real movement work and organizing on the ground with communications. That often in our work we think of communications as kind of an afterthought. We're like, oh yeah, we should do that later. And what we try to do with story-based strategy is connect the organizing, which is incredibly important, with the communications by telling our stories, what it means to tell our own stories and our stories jointly together. The idea today is to play. We're not trying to evaluate or judge necessarily in really harsh ways. So to try to throw glitter, not shade, and when we're doing creative work, you could be like, oh, I kind of like that, and I can do this, instead of being like, I don't like it. You know, that's kind of a different tone for creative work. So to get us started, Chris is going to bring us through an exercise to introduce the room to each other.
Cool. Today we're going to get to participate a lot, interact with each other, share stories, right? But before we do that, there's a very crucial step. We gotta become homies, right? So we gotta get to know each other, right? And usually in this settings, right, we just say our name and organization to kind of the universe. And that's cool, but we wanna do something a little different, right? And get us moving and actually have us introduce each other face to face. So what we're gonna do is that when I give you the 1, 2, 3, everybody's gonna stand up. And then we're gonna look around the room and look for someone we don't know. So I'm gonna say, hey, what's good?
Hey.
I'm Chris.
I'm Kiara.
So, and I'm gonna share my name, and then I'm gonna share my favorite pop icon, whatever that means for you, whatever popular culture you come from, you're gonna pick your favorite pop icon and then a story of why you chose it. And maybe we can move to this side so they can see. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna say, hey, my name is Chris. My favorite pop icon is Raphael from the Ninja Turtles. And the reason why I like him is because I always thought he was the coolest, and when I was a little kid, I would go up to the sewers and yell his name, but he never really came out, so that was really sad, but, and it's true story. And so he's always been my favorite pop culture icon. How about you?
Okay. My name is Kiara, and one of my favorite pop culture icons is Betty Boop, because she's classic and old school, but she keeps it a little fun.
Awesome. So then, when we got this going on, we're gonna look for somebody else. And then, Christine, you wanna come? And then we're gonna use our other hand and say, hey, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on?
And then we're gonna do the 3 questions again. And when I'm done with Christine, I'm gonna grab this hand and find somebody else and introduce myself, and so on and so forth. So let's all get up, and at the count of 3, we're gonna start our story chain. 1, 2, 3, go.
They're doing it.
We're doing it on our own, I know.
All right, folks, let's start wrapping up introductions. Come back to our seats. So let's start breaking the chains. Let's start coming back to the room. Now that we're story homies, right? We're gonna get into some deeper questions about our stories and our beliefs and so on. So I'm gonna hand it over to Kiara for the next piece. Thank you guys for participating.
Thanks, Chris. Great, thank you, Chris. All right, so we just got comfortable, but I actually want us all to come over here into this empty space. So come over here and join me. Okay, so you'll notice on the wall we have two signs, and this side says disagree. Arr. And this side says agree. And so this is a spectrogram, a continuum. And so if you're way against that wall, you really, really disagree. And if you're somewhere in the middle, you're a little neutral. So I'm gonna read a statement, and you're gonna move your body to where you feel called. Oh, I'm gonna agree with that statement. You're gonna move way over here. Feel me? Okay, so my first statement is, people don't join my group because they don't agree with us. People don't join my group because they do not agree with us. Agree or disagree? People don't join my group because they don't agree with us. Let's start over here with agreement. Lou, can you tell me why you're on this side?
Yeah, because I think I tend to agree with that a lot of people don't join what we do because they don't agree with us. However, I also think that our story and our message is so strong that we do get some converts. Not many, but eventually in time, I think we'll bring everybody over to our side.
Excellent. Okay, let me check on the other side and see what's going on over here. So we've got some against the wall. And reaching for the mic. Go ahead.
Well, that's not the reason why they don't join our organization.
Yeah.
Probably because they don't understand us and our message in terms of what we are and what we do gets convoluted.
Absolutely. So you disagree with the statement because it's not that people don't agree with us. They just don't understand what we're about. We have some communication work to do, and then they're going to join us, right? So we can still be in disagreement with the statement and be hopeful about the future. We just don't understand what our work is about, right? Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Did that move anybody? Go ahead and move. Go ahead and move. She's coming right over. Okay, I want to hear from you now, because that's the biggest movement we've seen so far. So tell me, Reggie, tell
I
me.
agree more because it's all about understanding, and when you're not aware, you don't know what's going on. So
That moved you,
Open
then
the
you're over.
eyes.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let me check in the middle a little bit, because there's actually a lot of folks kind of neutral in the middle. Let me come to you, and I notice you're almost to the dot on the center. So tell me why you chose to stand here.
I think there are other issues that take place, maybe transportation, other issues like that.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of obstacles that keep people from joining us, and you understand those. So it might not be disagreement, but people are busy. There's all kind of barriers, and that's what we need to focus our work on, right? Okay. So anybody moved by this statement? Sorry, what's your name? Alicia. Everybody heard what Alicia said? We got to work on these barriers and make sure people can access, and then they're going to move with us. One more statement. In my work, young people are the ultimate decision makers. In my work, young people are the ultimate decision makers. Agree, disagree? Okay, wow. We've really spread. So let me come to you, Teresa. I notice you're kind of in the center here, and I want to hear what you're thinking about.
So I try to, after attending the first workshop, we've always included young people, but after the initial start of the series, we try to include them more. So they don't have the final say, but they do have some say. So that's why I'm in the middle, because I still have to ask, our administrators if it's okay, but want the young people to be comfortable with it also.
Right. So you're in the middle because you're like, we're working on it. We got young people involved, but ultimate decision makers, we're not there yet. Okay, anyone moving closer to Teresa? Hearing that? Let me go over here to the disagree. Well, I see my friends are still here. Some people just really set up here. Marla, let me hear from you.
Well, We haven't gotten to a point where we're engaging the young people yet, so it's kind of a future thing. That's why I'm over here.
Okay, makes sense. Absolutely, we're getting there. So we haven't even quite cracked that nut yet. Absolutely. Davida?
Wow. I guess I would have to move closer to Marlo. We haven't just gotten to the point where we've started to engage young people at this particular point.
Okay, so we can't call them ultimate decision makers because we haven't quite gotten there with them yet. Okay, great. Let me check on this side because some people said, oh, absolutely, right? Todd?
Well, I believe that, you know, the program, if you're going to try to move young people, you've got to have the young people making those decisions because that's how your gang will grow, by having them be a part of it.
And so in your work, the young people are the ultimate decision makers?
They make 95% of the decisions on how the program is going to run.
Wow, so Todd said, yeah, that's how we running things over here, right? Anybody moving closer? Anybody moving closer? Let me come back here. Can I ask you? You're in agreement?
Sure.
Allie?
Yeah, I think I'm thinking more like young people may not be directly involved in like making all the final decisions, but every decision that's made is sort of for them and with them if they're not actively involved. So I do feel like ultimately they're sort of the decision makers.
Okay, a little vagueness maybe. We're still thinking about it. We're figuring it out. Well, there are young people in the mix, but are they really ultimately? We think, well, we don't know. Anyone else feel called to share their perspective on this one? Yeah, please.
In terms of our programming, we do a really good job of like letting young people be the ultimate decision makers, but in terms of like really influencing the entire culture of the structure and organization, they don't ultimately have decision-making power. So we're pushing it, and as young people are starting to learn in our organization, they're demanding to see budgets, they're demanding to sit on boards, and so as that stuff happens, we have to like work and fix and figure out the culture in order to make that happen. Absolutely. So we're working on it, but not 100% there yet.
We have lots of different models in the room, and some of us say, yeah, we're working on that. That's important to us, but we haven't quite cracked that. Not yet. But we also have the roundtable, and we're hearing, oh yeah, we're doing that work. We're doing that work. So we have wisdom in the room that we can talk to each other.
My question is that how do we engage if we're looking to crack that nut to get youth more involved? And are there resources or organizations that do, on that side of the room, already have a strong showing and strong support and advocacy for youth? How can we engage with them? How can we make those connections, those partnerships, those allies, so that we're not reinventing the wheel, but what we're doing is we're tapping into their network, we're tapping into those resources, we're pulling the youth from those organizations because we want to engage them as well.
Absolutely. Great question. And we do have expertise in the room. And part of the reason we do this exercise is just to surface. Where are we at? What are we thinking? And you could do it even within your own organization, and you think we work together every day, we kind of know the deal, but it'll surface different ways of thinking. And I want to encourage you to have those conversations today over breaks, over lunches, and we'll try to surface as much as we can today. But just to recognize that there are different expertise in the room that we can draw from is really important. Thanks for your comment.
The reason I'm over here, though, is because I took this specific, not as an agency, but to my role. And in fund development, my audience is the donor and the board. And so that's where I was coming from. But as an agency, we're very youth-focused, so looking forward to those conversations.
Nice. Yeah, so there's different ways to understand it. Let's say actually the ultimate decision makers in fund development are the donors. And so we structure our organization in a certain way, but let's be real about who makes decisions about how funds are allocated, right? Thank you, Heather. Yeah.
Okay, with me, I work in a transitional living program. So if the residents make the decisions, we wouldn't have a program because they don't like rules. So if there's a rule that you have to be in at 11 and there's no boys allowed in your room, you have to go to school every day. So they would like to change it, and their input is, why can't we have boys? Why do we have to go to school? Why can't I come in at 1 o'clock in the morning? So what we allow them to do is express how they feel, even though it's not going to change, but what we do is to let them know the reason why we have these rules set up for safety. And so that's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it depends on your setting.
It does depend on the setting. It does depend on the setting. And there's lots of different models too, like more restorative justice models about how do you get help from the residents to hold the agreements that you make together, right? There are certain rules. We have to uphold the structure in this setting. And so you are the ultimate decision maker about that. But we always know that agreements hold stronger when people make them together, right? So how do we kind of look at that? Okay, great. One more question. If people knew what was really going on, they would join and take action. If people knew the facts about what was really going on, they would join us and take action. So a lot of agreement around this statement here, a lot of agreement. Let's hear from someone over here in agreement.
You know, truly, if parents understood the state of emergency that we're in with our young people, if parents understood the fact that we are our child's first teachers, then they wouldn't enter school 2 and 3 years behind. So it's just, you know, to me, it's important that our parents are empowered, so they are able to do what they should be doing at home before they release them out into the streets. I mean, you know.
So you think if parents had those facts and they really understood, they would get on board and they would start to support their children? Absolutely. All right, you're here all by yourself, so I want to make sure.
I feel kind of lonely.
Yeah, I'll stand next to you, though.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I feel that even with knowledge, there is that next step of action, and I think we have a large amount of our population that is not has not been involved with action. They don't know how to activate themselves. So I think knowledge is the first step, but then how do you take that knowledge to the next step? And I think that's where that gap might increase in terms of people actually moving on that knowledge.
Yeah, people know some things, right? And there's still a barrier. You know, I always think of cigarettes and smoking, the tobacco companies, right? People, at this point, if you don't know that's killing you, come on. But to take that knowledge and to take action, there's a big jump there. Anybody swayed by this? Uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. See, that's how you get company. That's how you get company. So anyone else really want to speak about this facts? Yeah.
You know, it's a desire to change. So just because you know something, just like you said with the cigarettes, there's people who got cancer, but they still sit and smoke a cigarette with cancer, even though it's eating them alive. So it's a desire that has to come with that knowledge also, because people see kids all day long felling out, or their own kids even felling out, and you know, they still don't show up to parent-teachers conferences. That's because they don't want to, not necessarily because they don't know or don't know how. They just don't want to.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on the word fact, because that which struck a chord with me as well. And it's not only the fact, right? It's where the fact is coming from. It's who the messenger is. People are giving their opinion without giving the facts.
Absolutely.
So it's not even about the facts, but who is the messenger? Who is the keeper of the truth? And who do we turn to find out what the real information really is?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. That's a great kind of segue to the work that we're going to try to do today. And sometimes at the center, we talk about the difference between truth and meaning. And part of it is what you're talking about in terms of getting under where is this message coming from, who put this together. I mean, the advertising industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry in investment. So when we talk about putting out our little social justice messages, it's not into a vacuum. It's into an industry that's already shaped a lot of meaning. Not facts, but meaning, because it makes us buy things, it makes us need things, it makes us feel some kind of way. And so truth is subjective, as you brought up. Truth is very subjective. We have to talk to each other to understand each other's truths. But also often in social justice work or in the left, we think we have the truth. X number of young people are incarcerated in this country, right? It's like, that is true. And we think if we just hammer those facts at people, we're going to make some change, right? I mean, it's very genuine. We're going to make social change, and we're going to tell. If people knew, people are dying out here in these streets. That is a true fact. But it doesn't mobilize people. And so when you want to mobilize people and you want to move something, you have to make meaning. So we do encourage the truth in the work that we do. Absolutely tell the truth. Don't lie, because we don't get in that business. Tell the truth, but make it meaningful. And that's the story-based strategy work. So how do you take that truth and make it meaningful and have characters and have a story that people can say, oh, whoa, we need to do something about this right here. So that's what we're going to work on today, yeah? All right, come on back over here. Thanks so much. When we did the spectrogram exercise, we surfaced a lot of the assumptions that people are trying to do youth-led work. And for some folks, that's really new, and some folks have been working with it a lot. And so when they were able to see each other in the room, they can now begin to access the wisdom that's already here in this community.
So as Kiara was saying, at Center for Story-Based Strategy, we are not saying, like the other side often does, we are not saying to lie in our work, but we've finally come to the kind of to the realization over 10 years of experimenting with these tools that while we think, what we like to think is that truth is what moves people, is what, because it's true, it will be meaningful. It's actually the opposite, that when something is meaningful, people think it's true. So who at some point in their life, or still do, believe in Santa Claus? I know, he's...
What you mean?
So I don't know if everybody knows, but the big fat man in the red suit doesn't actually go to every chimney in the house. All over the world, right? But when you're young, and this idea of giving was such a powerful, meaningful story for people that, or for kids, that it becomes a thing that people actually believe in. So we're gonna do a couple of slides, and this is, we're still gonna need a lot of interaction, so we're asking you to interact on that. I'm gonna show you a video, and I want you to watch it, and then you're gonna tell me what's going on in this video, okay? It's very short. What's happening there? What is that? What do people think just happened in that video? Let's go over here. What do you guys think happened in that video? A little on thing, thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So if the triangles were like the parents, and then the circle was the child, you know, there was the bullying happening between the parents, and the child was scared inside the house, and then the one parent came in and kind of scared the child a little bit, and then the other parent and the child ended up running away, and then being chased by the other parent, and then the other parent getting angry and breaking the house, like literally breaking the family, breaking the house down.
Okay. Thank you. How about here in the middle? What stories do we have here in the middle? Okay, right here.
You know, to me, it looked like the big triangle was Dad waiting on his daughter to come home with her boyfriend, and he went outside and snatched the little ass up, and you know, and it just went off from there.
I do some work with the wheel of power and abuse, and it was kind of like the larger triangle is the dominant, and the others are the more subordinate. So the larger triangle is kind of abusing that power.
So the big triangle abusing the power. So what we get at with this slide is, this is a very simple slide. It's a box, 2 triangles, and a circle. And the first thing that y'all did was make a story out of it. So really, we show this. This is a psychological experiment, basically. And how simple it is, if one triangle is bigger than the other, that can already shape how we're making the story, or this box, what it can be. It's literally just shapes moving on the screen, right? But what we do as humans, what makes us very unique, is that we are what we like to call narrative animals. We will look in the sky and we will make up a story about connecting the dots in the sky, right? So what if I went to a group and said, I'm going to show you 2 triangles, a circle, and a square. There's 2 triangles, a circle, and a square. We think that's important. Versus getting the triangles and the square and the circle to move, and learning and getting people to connect those dots. So what we've learned is that facts are kind of like stars in the sky, and meaning is constellations and how we connect those stars. So one that I didn't show on here is, there's, you know, the Big Dipper is an example. Is there really a giant spoon in the sky? Is there a giant spoon in the sky? No, right? So there is not a giant spoon in the sky. But what we've learned is that for us in our work is that other people will sometimes connect the dot for the people we're trying to move, and sometimes we need to make it easy to connect the dots for what we think people should do, right? So when we talked about over there, we were walking around and saying, if people just knew the facts, they would really get into this work. And so maybe what we have to look at is whether we're connecting the dots for people in a clear way so that they will actually want to move with us. All right. So, what's the story of this picture? First Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. Who are the characters in that? Native Americans and Pilgrims, Indians, and the turkey. The turkey is a character. We don't think about that turkey ever. What would the story look like from the turkey's perspective? So what are the values that we're conveying in this story? What are you supposed to believe if you believe this slide? Peace. What's Thanksgiving about? Happiness. I'm sorry? Coming together, sharing, giving thanks, right? So what actually happened? Genocide. What was the other? I heard backfire. Germs. So the real story is actually not as pretty as this picture, right? But this is what we like to call a very strong dominant narrative. So when we're in school, we get taught this story when we're what, 7? 8? Anybody make the hand turkey? Right? And then you draw a little head. So we're taught the Thanksgiving story when really the truth around this is a little bit more complicated. But then the Thanksgiving story will drive a lot of policy and things that we do now when it's very different, that there actually are not a lot of Native Americans and there is incredible genocide and killing of people, but that's not the story we're introduced. So there's a reason why we introduce dominant stories into kind of our culture and what that means, because we want to teach kids to be giving, to be thankful, to share. And so we make stories like that. What's the one on the right? Ellis Island immigrants. What are they looking at? The Statue of Liberty. What else is happening in that story? Family. And they're looking at the Statue of Liberty. So this is the story of immigrants at the turn of the century in the early 1900s, right? Is that the story of immigrants now? No, I heard a lot, no. So this dominant narrative about immigrants is around very particular immigrants and about immigrants getting the American dream, but this is a dominant narrative. So as you can imagine in immigration policy now, what is it we hear a lot of the time? Why don't you just lift yourself up by your bootstraps? Other people did it. But the deeper story here is also around that same time, and something I mean that's personally true for me, is there was also, they only let in certain immigrants at this time. Immigrants from places where my family comes from were not allowed in this country at that time, right? And then immigrants now may not even have that same, maybe in here she has the headscarf, it's about 1920s, they might be an Eastern European immigrant family, right? But immigration looks very different now in who's coming into this country. So in our work, it's important to understand that it's not necessarily about what people don't know, because oftentimes we go, well, if they just knew this, they would get with us. Oftentimes, it's about what people already know. So if you can imagine people who do immigration work, like Chris or other folks in the room, if this is the dominant story that people have about immigrants, a lot of people aren't going to be very sympathetic if that's what they think is still true about how immigration works today. They're like, what's the big deal? Why don't you just get your papers? Why don't you follow the law and do that? Because that's the dominant story that they already have in their ears. And so when we try to talk at that without realizing that this is what's already in their head, that we're not going to move them. So the media landscape that we're working with is incredibly complicated, and often we come to it saying, I'm just going to slap down my message and I think it'll move people because I think it's true and it's meaningful to me. I want to talk a little bit about another piece of landscape around our think space. What is this? It's the alphabet. Logos. What else? What do you see? Advertising. Branding. Anything else? Different styles. Does anybody see any other things? Are you hungry? Is there anything coming up here? Do you feel clean? Does anybody know those letters and what they're connected to? Eggo. Eggo, Pez, Oreo. Wow, you are a corporate machine. Anyone else? Anyone else? Yeah. Coca-Cola. What else? I see. Anybody here? What do you see? You see Fritos. Oh, that is Frito-Lay. Excellent. V8. Nice. Oh, I'm not, we don't. Bubblicious. We don't get a lot of people get the V8. Campbell's, good. All right, so what's funny about this is on the surface, this is just the alphabet. This is just the alphabet. And it's funny, we say they're brand and logos. They're not even logos. These are fonts. You know, when you pick this one letter can carry a whole story. Campbell's, good soup. Healthy for you. It's comforting. Your mom just gave you tomato soup because you're sick. Like, that's all in that letter. The average American can identify 1,000 to 2,000 corporate logos off the top of the head. Did you memorize these? Did you all go home and memorize these at some point? Don't lie. No, right? This is the landscape we're working with. So when we talk about making meaning and communications in our work, a lot of the times, you know, I come from the environmental justice movement. A lot of times we're working against maybe, for instance, Chevron, who's polluting a community, say Richmond, California. And Chevron has a budget of millions? Billions to do this kind of work. What we have that they don't have are real people and experiences. Unfortunately, in our media landscape today, somebody is going to capsule our message. Somebody's going to put it in a little capsule. The question is, who is going to put it in that capsule? Is it going to be us? Or is it going to be the media? Or is it going to be our opponents? We're not saying that our issues are simple enough that they should all be cut down to a little thing. We're not saying that. What we're saying is that in the media landscape we are in today, is that we need to figure out how to make things sticky and small that carry our meaning, or else somebody's going to do it for us. And so we need to think about how we do that and how we package it.
So we're just gonna get three, in groups of three. Pick one storyteller and share a story, and then we'll come back and share the stories that we heard, and then talk about the elements of the story, and then get to identify them. Okay? Let's go.
It was a really nice restaurant and bar, and they had like a pianist and things like that. And so that's where they went. And so we're sitting there. She takes me after work because she had to go out.
You know, visiting to see if it's a good match. When I got there,
a lot of people.
It was in this like factory. Each person has to do a story. Yeah.
So every time he sees me without other kids, he's like,
To me, or they don't sit with me. Imagine my heart was aching, but he was still smiling when he was saying it. And
So how were the stories that you all shared with each other? So can the storyteller of each group raise their hand? You? Yeah. Cool. So for the people that were listening, right, not the storyteller, the ones that got to listen, can y'all share the story that you heard? Y'all are laughing now. I want to laugh. Who told the story? You did? Breathe. You got this.
So our storyteller was Susan here. Her story was about her mother getting back on the dating scene. I guess like she was, you were an attorney, right, in California? She was an attorney in California. And her and her mother had went out to this senior citizen place called the Ritz. So they're there and they're getting dinner or whatever. And I guess her mom saw someone who was very attractive. He had a bow tie, so that's always attractive. So I guess her mom told the waiter to send him a drink. I guess he received the drink and he came over to the table and he engaged in conversation, and Susan thought it was a great idea to ask him about what does she think about Barack Obama. Was it running for the election or? Okay, yeah, running for the election. And he told her that he's a great Louis Farrakhan, is that what he was saying? After he said that, Susan's mother got really upset and said, F you, Susan, grab our bill. Like, it was just, so that was our
Awesome.
wonderful story that we couldn't stop laughing at.
Cool. So we got some good stories coming out, right? It'll make us laugh, we understand what's going on, right? And the reason why that happens is because stories have elements to them. And some of those elements, we kind of divide them in 5, and I'm just gonna lay this in the middle. And first, we got conflict in our stories, right? Conflict is the backbone of our stories. It's what makes our stories juicy, right? There's always something going on, right? So they're really the backbone. There are characters too, right? They're the protagonist, the antagonist, what have you. There's people and things that become characters in the story, right? We also have images, show, don't tell. And a lot of times, for example, when you were sharing the story, you were saying there was a gentleman sitting and he was wearing a bow tie. So I was picturing, right, the homie while you were describing him. So images are very embedded in stories, and it's something a lot of times when we tend to speak and tell stories, we kind of fill the story with just words. And what we really want to do is fill them with images, paint a picture for our audience, right? Then we have some foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is essentially the things that let us know what's going to happen in the future. And then we have underlying assumptions, right? Underlying assumptions are the things that are not explicit in the story, but we have to believe in order to determine that the story is true. I don't like to say buy into, but in order to own stories together, right? Does that make sense? Cool. So essentially, in the stories that we share, we got to see all those elements, right? These are really foundational 5 really simple points that are going to help us craft effective narratives. Cool? So what we're going to do now, before we transition into the next piece, we're going to learn the power of framing, how stories get framed. So in order to do that, we're going to do a human sculpture. So I need 3 people that are down to do a human sculpture. A lot of times in our work, right, there's power. So what we gotta do is have 3 people create a human sculpture, and the rest of the group can help us figure it out, right? That represents power over, when people have power over us. So can I have 3 people that would be down to do it? Okay, we got 1. Anybody else? Homie, I know you want to do it. I can just see it right through you. All right, 2 and 1 more. 1 more. It'll be harmless. The other groups are doing it too. I could just pick someone too. Cool. All right, so let's come to the front. The 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. So when we think about when people have power over us, what do we see in our minds? How would you represent that in a human sculpture? Does that make sense? So like one that makes a lot of sense that people use is that one person will get on the floor and the other people will be above them, like that. Or things like that, you know? Wow. So you can sit down on the chair.
So have them sit on the floor.
Cool, and then you guys should stand both on that chair.
So you want closer, and then you want me to?
Right there, that's the sculpture. When we come back and we get in our sculptures, we're gonna bring up 2 chairs, get in our pose, and hold it.
That's the pose?
Yep, and then the other 2 groups are gonna do the same thing. So we're gonna do an activity called Still Life with Power. All right, so can we have all the people doing our human sculptures make it to the front? So we're gonna learn a little bit about the power of stories and the power of framing. So if we could have our folks get into their human sculptures for us, and then we'll dive in. Let's go. Okay. Cool. So we're gonna look at these human sculptures one by one, and if y'all get tired, feel free to take a break until we get to you. Because otherwise, I mean, hold it for like 20 minutes, we good. So when we look at this first human sculpture, right, from the best team, number 1, no bias, what do we see? What do we have in front of us here? What do we see when we look at this?
Well, the first thing I noticed, it looks like it's 3 separate powers, and one is like at the bottom, then the next one is like picking on that one, and then the one at the top is picking on the second one.
Okay, what else? What do we see up here? We got people picking at each other.
My first thought was kind of like generational discipline type things. Like, it looks like the mom is yelling at her son, but then her mom probably did the same thing to her, and even though she probably hated it as a kid, she's doing the same thing that she hated.
Right. Okay, so we got some juicy stuff coming up. We got a mom yelling at their kids, and the grandma's there too, and she's like, yo, no offense, And she's like, yo, don't be doing that, right? What else? What else do we got? Over here.
I see that there's like a mom trying to help their child, and overpowering all of that is a spiritual being.
Oh, okay. That's different. That's different. That's some good stuff. When we talk about our stories, right, and we have stories of like power over, it's usually not our story. It's usually not us telling the story, and it's usually not us controlling the story. So there's a little thing that we call framing. This is really key because if you guys want to get back into the... Because when we see this and we see power over, what happens if I take this frame and I go like this? What do you guys see here? A loving relationship. They cool, right? She's like, yo, I got you, right? See? She said it, right? But what happens if I just go like this? What do we see here? Right? Right? So we have the power to frame the stories however we want and share them with the world, right? When we frame our stories, our audience see what we want them to see. Truth versus meaning we were talking about before, right? This is the point of this exercise that's really fun, is that our stories have power. And that's framing, and that's still life with power. So thank you guys for participating with this. So thank y'all. In my small group, the people that I got to work with, folks were down to participate right away. There was very little resistance to the exercises that we have, and sometimes people come from different backgrounds, so they tend to be like, no, I don't do that, or I do too much of that. But this time around, we were having fun, and we got to build with each other in a really good way. And that's something that obviously happens when we do trainings, but sometimes it takes a little bit of a push for people to get comfortable. And here, people were down right away.
They wanted me to kick off with a poem. First, I want to talk a little bit, just a little bit about Inside Out. Some of you have already heard this little spiel, but Inside Out Literary Arts Project is a nonprofit organization that works with youth in school and after school to build their creative writing skills and just self-expression skills as well. So there's an after-school program called Citywide Poets. There are 3 or 4 different sites where students can come after school and work one-on-one with 2 artists from the city. And there's also the in-school program where a writer-in-residence goes into the school once a week into the English classes for the entire day and works with the entire English class. However, I'm here for poems, so I shall spit a poem. Who here knows what slam is? Slam poetry. Cool. All right, so for those of you who don't know, slam poetry is the competition aspect of spoken word. The poet goes up, performs his poem. There are 5 judges who judge that poem based on content and or performance. This poem makes a reference to slam in terms of the time limit. The time limit for a slam poem is 3 minutes and 10 seconds, because if you go much longer than that, your poem is entirely too long and nobody really wants to listen to you for 5 minutes. This is a poem, not a speech. So this poem makes a reference to that, so I feel like everybody needs that information in order to make the proper connections. No Beowulf on stage. I remember always wanting to move to a small town, next to a coffee house, where I could enjoy sliding wooden chair legs, clinking china, and rising steam, all tethered together by the flowing voice of some traveling poet. And I remember the day I realized I couldn't leave my city, no matter how many flaws it has. Every day I contemplate the best way to fit drawn-out personal theories about why my neighborhood is filled with overgrown vacant fields into 3 minutes and 10 seconds. See, slam is easy. Saying something important is hard. Drawing memories of my city's forgotten pulse and turning it into something worth finding again is hard, like realizing my city is still beautiful when the people around me toss Molotov cocktails through windows during 3 a.m. street fights. They hold dirty looks as if I took their freedom. I wake up to 9mm shells in my front yard. Welcome to my city. Beauty isn't obvious, but anger beats at our front doors like police giving a last warning. I scream hatred over city limits, hoping lost residents will hear me. I am one of the faithful citizens, rooted like flagpoles, writing love poems to my city, no matter how many dark alleys I tread through or potholes that I almost swim in. Detroit was ranked the angriest city in America. And we should be angry. Our communities are isolated, unity dissected by freeways. We can't be linked together by overpasses, so artists graffiti turbulence against abandoned walls, hoping will lead someone to see our gaping wounds. Poets spill blood on stage, wage war. We are a militia, breaking myths outsiders created. Detroit is more than riots and bankrupt car companies, but America believes Detroit is just another dot on its map, believes our potential is buried, forgetting everything that grows starts underground. We are not fighting each other, but we are fighting to be the first ones to sprout like palm trees in the dead of winter, to be something extraordinary. We became Detroit when we learned that mountainous skylines and upper-class neighborhoods aren't what make our city thrive. Our pulse is in the rhythm of summer festivals. It throbs when subwoofers loud enough to set off car alarms. We swap business suits and briefcases for rest in peace shirts and dog chains. We don't have to be Hollywood or some peaceful suburb to take pride in the streets we have built. When we unite, you will remember that we have been waiting patiently in the corner of your palm. This is more than just a performance. These are words to a better Detroit, a reason to believe that my fury will never burn in vain. Thank you.
Let's give it up for Justin. So I asked Justin actually to re-say that poem because I wanted to really ground us in Detroit, because what we're going to do this afternoon, just a little foreshadowing, is to craft a little fairy tale about Detroit youth. So we're going to do that a little bit later, but we're going to look at what is the landscape around the thinking of Detroit right now that will influence kind of what the story is we want to tell about Detroit youth, all right? So who remembers the elements of story that we did? Conflict, characters, images, foreshadowing, and underlying assumptions, right? Okay, so I want you to hold those in your head, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a very shortened version of an exercise that we do when we work with folks on trying to identify what is already out there about the story we're trying to change. So we just picked a really quick video to show, and I want you to think about those elements as we show this video, and then we're going to talk about it afterward. Y'all ready? All right, here we go.
I got a question for you. What does this city know about luxury? Huh? What does a town that's been to hell and back know about the finer things in life? Well, I'll tell you, more than most. You see, it's the hottest fires that make the hardest steel. Add hard work and conviction, and the know-how that runs generations deep in every last one of us. That's who we are. That's our story. Now, it's probably not the one you've been reading in papers, the one being written by folks who've never even been here and don't know what we're capable of. Because when it comes to luxury, it's as much about where it's from as who it's for. Now, we're from America, but this isn't New York City, or the Windy City, or Sin City, and we're certainly no one's Emerald City.
This is the Motor City, and this is what we do.
You guys want to see one more time, or did you get some of the elements from that? Tell me a little bit about it. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, pretty much they only show downtown, which is a lot like a lot of commercials about Detroit. It's not showing Detroit, it's just showing what a great downtown we have.
So a little bit of framing. There's a little bit of a frame in this. What else did people see? I see a hand back there.
I saw kind of the both sides. You know, you see the part where you see the grittiness, but then you hear the words of we're more than that. One theme that kind of jumped out is, you know, you have this ideal or this idea of Detroit, but it's coming from those who aren't even from Detroit. And I think that's why I enjoy this conversation, because we need to do a better job of crafting the story of what's happening in our city instead of allowing other people to co-opt the story of the city.
Fantastic. Other ideas about conflict, characters, framing. Let's go right here.
I thought that everything wasn't perfect. Like they showed that things are not perfect, but there's like a lot of fighters in the city. Like they focus on like the fist and like the different images that resembled strength and like people working together.
Let's take a couple more, then I'm going to ask you specifically about some elements.
I thought one of a pretty big conflict is the idea that Detroit doesn't have anything luxurious. Also, most of what has been framed out there in Detroit is place-based. It's based in buildings that are abandoned. And so they chose, instead of even a lot of people, they chose buildings specifically and architecture to tell a story that's different from the architecture that's usually told, that usually tells Detroit's story.
Okay. Let's take one more and then we'll go to conflict.
Actually, I just wanted to come back to the two young people. What you just said about downtown, is it an assumption that downtown is not Detroit? Are we talking a tale of two cities here?
It's not that it's not downtown. It's just the nicest part of Detroit. Like, to me, downtown is our Royal Oak. It's downtown. It's nice. It's more invested in. It's pretty much like the person they chose to do the video is someone who has left Detroit. No longer, you know, to me, he doesn't represent Detroit. He represents Eminem.
All right, that was definitely a character. So there were a couple characters listed up. You said Eminem was a pretty big character in that. Somebody also talked about the buildings being their own character. Was there a conflict in this video?
The conflict that I saw in the opening is actually southwest down, like the factories of Detroit. It's not downtown, but it's the hard-working factory part of Detroit. And then you see all the beautiful buildings that are in downtown Detroit. And like I told my family, if you go downtown Detroit now, it is so beautiful down there. You would think you were somewhere else. So I can agree with the young people as far as the neighborhood aspect, but our city is beautiful. So, you know, you can't go by what outsiders think.
Yeah, there's a little bit of inside Detroit and outside Detroit.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of downtown versus old to new. I heard one that was grittiness versus luxury. So let's get to characters. What people did we see? Or you can say something about conflict if you feel strongly. We have somebody back here.
Related to conflict imported from Detroit, there's a conflict there in terms of it's different than the rest of the country. There's imported from Detroit. This says something about we're not like other places, even though other places may think that they know us. So it's separating Detroit from
the rest of the U.S. is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Characters. Can folks name any other characters from the video?
A lot of what we're focusing on is the characters that you saw in the video. And if I can for a minute, I want to talk about the characters that were not in the video.
Perfect, exactly.
And the characters that I can most identify with that were not in the video were expats. And what I mean by that is that there's a reason why they chose to view this commercial during the Super Bowl. All eyes were watching in terms of the viewership. Do you know how many residents, people who were imported from Detroit, meaning born and raised and bred, who left the city of Detroit? Do you know how many expats there are of people who are living other places outside of the city of Detroit? People from all over the country who used to live in Detroit were so proud of that video. The people who live in Detroit, and you all may have problems with the imagery in terms of, oh, they only focused on downtown, but that's what we identified with those individuals who were no longer living in Detroit. So the fist was an identifier for us. Joe Louis was an identifier to us. Michigan Central train station was an identifier for us. So when you talk about the people who were, the characters who were not in the video, the expats, the people who they were talking about who no longer lived in the city was a huge character for me.
So we're going to talk about it in a couple minutes, but we're definitely going to talk about audience. So the audience is different, right? And no, let's be real. There's a generational gap between us. And folks and that's all right. That's all right. That's the reality that we live with. And so, this commercial will read differently to different people for a reason. And we're going to talk about who their stated audience was for this. I don't think their audience actually was Detroiters. Because they're playing it at the Super Bowl, right? So they're not talking to Detroiters, they're talking to everybody outside of that. But we'll get into audience in a second. Let's talk a little bit about what images did you see on that video? What was striking?
Mural at the DIA.
So what did that bring up for you, that image?
Just the image showed about the the automotive industry.
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of supported that.
Mm-hmm.
Detroit, known for the automotive capital of the world.
Mm-hmm. So it was establishing Detroit as a manufacturing city, a legacy of manufacturing. Right up here?
A couple of characters, that being music and also the positioning of the African American choir.
Tell me more, tell me more.
Well, music in that, I mean, you just heard the opening chords of Eminem's song, but everybody knew what that song was. People were really hyped about it. But then also you had this background, this choir that stood in the background as he stood forward, who provided in a lot of ways the buoyancy of the entire like second half of the thing, but they stayed kind of really back, and how race and how music and all that kind of got played out in just the way that everybody was positioned.
Excellent. And foreshadowing, was there any foreshadowing in this video?
The foreshadowing was the music, the playing of the chords leading up to, and then
build-up.
seeing tiny, tiny snippets of the car, not seeing the full car.
The car. Let's take right here.
The way they show Eminem face, they first showed it a little bit so it could be a mystery of who it was, and then they just show his face all the way.
Those are good elements that we identified. Let's get in the heads of some of these Chrysler ad people. So there, you're in Chrysler. We all work for Chrysler right now, and we decided to make a video that's for the U.S. car buying public. Let's say they're our audience because it was the Super Bowl. And what are things that we assumed about Detroit in this video in order to make this video?
That people that are not from Detroit don't know anything about it or think it's a terrible, dangerous place.
Right, so underlying assumption that the outsider view is Detroit is broke down and dangerous potentially. What else?
Underlying assumption, Detroit is a rough city. It's gritty, it's Batman. That's the assumption that people have of Detroit.
I saw underlying assumption of that most black men in Detroit are unemployed and doing nothing, so they showed the black man walking past in the suit with the, looking like he's going on business lunch or some stuff like that.
Interesting. One more right here.
One that I noticed was the focus on luxury versus poverty. That everyone in Detroit is poor. No one here understands what pure luxury is or what good things are.
Excellent. Good point to end on. So this is just an example of how we'll work with groups, and for instance, if they're working on a youth issue, we'll look at like a latest media clip or article on what's been said about young people and start to surface what are some of these things that already exist on there. We always look at, when we break down media, we look at who the audience is. And audience really grounds us in who we're trying to talk to. Has everybody ever said, my audience is the general public? If you are talking to everyone, you are talking to no one. That even a big company like Nike segments the people they talk to. So even a corporation that's humongous will do that. And so for our issues, when we want to really get at who, trying to get a message to somebody, we need to think very clearly about who our audience is. So a couple of questions we look at. Who are we trying to talk to? What do we want them to do? What do they value? Kind of some of those underlying assumptions. What values are we getting at? What are their filters and what they already have in their ears that might keep them from listening to us? And how do we reach them? In our work, a lot of the time, we are great at doing the story of the battle. So that means we're good at telling the story about the problem as we see it. We think our analysis and our way of thinking about an issue is the story. But instead of thinking of just describing the problem, how can you actually come up with a story that battles the dominant story? Literally, you're fighting for people's mind space. And so what you want to do is look at what is the other story out there, and then is our story like over here? Is it this big? Is it like a tiny baby fist? And then how we're kind of doing this to it. So this is actually an example of right around the Iraq War, and there was anti-war stuff going on. As you can see, this says, we can't stop the war without you. And then it says, F war. I won't say the whole thing. We call this the story of the battle. And the reason why we do that is because if you're not against the war and you saw this, would you even look at this? This was United for Peace, a place of sanity in a time of madness. This was actually their mobilization call to an action. They're assuming that their reader actually already is anti-war. Because F war, you know, they think that's funny, that's catchy, and then it says the only thing that we need in order to stop this war is youth. And then they put that in there. So we actually call this story the battle, and it's nuanced. It's hard to pick out. A lot of the times we're really good, and you still need a really good story to mobilize your own people, but that's very different than if you want to try to talk to a larger congregation. So for instance, I would say the flip side of this could be folks who are anti-war that we work with are Iraq vets against the war. That messenger is very different. That's a vet. And so people who may respect vets but not be anti-war might still listen to a vet who's anti-war. So that could be more battle the story based on who your character is. But mobilize versus persuade, are we trying to just mobilize the choir, or are we trying to reach the congregation, which goes out beyond the values? And in this case, usually when we're mobilizing, we're telling people what they should do but not why they should do it. In battle of the story, you want to bring across to people why you want them to do something, and then tell them what it is. So it's a little bit of the reverse. So we want to talk a little bit about what this actually battle of the story looks like in real life. So Kiara's going to go into an example actually from Boston.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a quick little story about Boston youth organizing. Youth Way on the MBTA is the name of this campaign, and it's famous. So y'all might have heard of it, but I'm going to tell you a little story about it. So it's a multi-year campaign. They've been working for some of the young people that I was working with when they were in high school are now like grown adults, like in college or working, whatever. So it's been many years that they've been working on this issue. And really their goals were really about making the T, which is the subway, and the bus, the public transit system in Boston, more affordable and have quality of service, make sure young people are safe, all people are safe, and make sure they're respected. So they just had some small little goals. You know, they're going to take on public transit across the whole city. And they were working for a long time, but they're organizers. So part of what they do is talk to their people. So they had surveyed thousands, like over 2,000 young people in the city, and asked them about their experience riding buses and trains, and what was making them unsafe, and what was making them disrespected, and when was the service not working for them, and how much of their pocket was coming out for this. So they really had all this data, and they were meeting with state and national transit officials. They said, well, we've got thousands and thousands of surveys collected from young people, information. And the transit officials said, what now? The transit officials had no data on young people specifically, young people's ridership. So they leaned in like, you got what now? So they realized, oh, we got something. We have information that no one else has, which is what is the experience of youth riders on the T and on the buses. And so they said, we need to put a report together. But they were like, who cares about a report? We don't want it to just sit on somebody's desk. We want it to move our organizing goals. But what happened was they went through the session, they went through strategy, and they built out frames. So I'm going to show you 3 different frames, because after the strategy session, they came out with these 3 frames. Y'all, they had to choose one. They could not choose 2. They had to choose one frame, which was very difficult. So how are they going to frame this report and this issue? Number 1 is the innovation frame. So this frame is about future Boston, right? Detroit. And this is a world-class city. This is a 21st century city. There's going to be technology and apps for this. And if this city's going to move forward, it needs a public transit system that's world-class and innovative and has technology, and you can know that your bus is late from your app, and right? So then we have environmental justice, civil rights frame. This frame says it's our right to ride. And this is a crisis. This is an issue of justice, of racial justice, environmental justice. You know which neighborhoods are not accessible to the bus and the T. You already know who lives there. And there's a legacy, and so they started pulling civil rights images, bus boycotts. They photoshopped themselves into the images, and they said, no, civil rights, y'all think that happened 50 years ago? Look at me, I'm 15 years old, and I'm still riding this bus. Rosa Parks right here next to me. And if you want to look at transit in this city, you need to deal with this. 3rd frame, opportunity. This frame is about, we're going places. We're opportunity. The youth can take the T to opportunity. What they got, hold the bus, because I'm going to college. I'm gonna graduate, I'm gonna make something of myself, right? And if I can't take the T, I can't access opportunities for my future. 3 different frames. Now, which one do you think they chose? 3, 1. Why 1?
I think 1 would be the choice, at least for me, because it speaks to the future. Chris talked about creating a visionary future in which you can see yourself. I can see myself in that future, but I can't see myself in the other two frames.
Right, right.
Though it doesn't appeal to me as much, number 3 would probably be strategic because it frames the transit officials as being heroes or being part of the solution versus part of the problem.
You let those transit officials be the hero, they can help you access. Okay, Marlo, you're onto something there. Yeah.
The reason why I chose number 1 is maybe what they chose is because it's like an opportunity for people to make money off of the youth. And then technology is also just really popular, but they also know that youth have cell phones and iPods, and it's a money-making strategy.
Absolutely. There's economy loaded into this innovation frame, which you picked up on. Nobody picked number 2? Say it again, Heather.
It's my favorite, but it's not going to get listened to.
She said it's her favorite, but it's not going to get listened to. What I didn't go all the way over with you is who their audience was, who their targets were, but some of you picked up on the strategy of what they were really trying to do. And so for the base, for the young people, they said, oh yeah, that's what we do all day, every day. We're youth organizers. We work on justice, environmental justice, civil rights, safety, health. That's our frame. But the strategy was about how we reach these targets and how we move something, because really what we wanted was a youth pass that all young people could afford and be on. So keep our eye on the gold. Which one did they pick? Number 3. They all were really strong. It was a really hard choice. It was a really hard conversation. But it was a strategy. And so they came up with this little meme. This T is the symbol for the metro in Boston. It's called the T. And so they came up with this opportunity using the symbol of the T. And so here you see some of the report. We take an opportunity to work. And you see their statistics in the stripe. 29% of young people have arrived or missed work because they couldn't. So that's the stats that they had in their survey and how they packaged it. They launched the report, they invited the officials, and on the spot they agreed to a pilot study, which meant for the summer they would issue a youth pass and do a trial run and see how it works. So huge win. Look at all that, y'all. Those are local papers, Boston Globe, all kind of papers. Community-based papers because they wanted to reach their folks and their constituency. Big media because they wanted to meet the policymakers. Famous. So it's a really good story, and their campaign is ongoing. But transit justice, youth organizing, opportunity, keep it moving. What are we doing?
Thank you. There's no magic bullet to any of this stuff. We're not saying that communications will ever replace the organizing or the face-to-face interaction you have with people. That all still needs to happen, but to bring it up to another level, you can bake storytelling into it that will then let people grasp onto something that is really meaningful. And then that is the end of our stuff. And you can find a lot of this stuff online at our, on our website, storybasedstrategy.org. And definitely reach out to us if you want to learn how to work with us more.
I just want to say I think you guys did a great job. It was a really great day. Been to a lot of conferences and things, and it was really good.
The Detroit youth workers and the youth themselves were incredibly energizing and inspiring today. Just really a lot of hope around Detroit. So to be in here and just be with so many people that are making change in Detroit and just really believing in the youth and the power of youth was super inspiring.
I learned how to structure your story when you tell your story, about the different characters you use and emotions to put in there to get your views across.
The energy that I have right now from so many people in the room, I now know that I'm not in it by myself. My organization is not in it by ourselves. And to be in a room full of inspiring folks who are just as committed to the city of Detroit as I am, man, I am fired up and ready to go.
We had an incredible group to work with here. The Community Foundation and the Johnson Center have really assembled a wide group of folks who are committed to working together and serving youth in the Metro Detroit area. So I always say our work is only as good as the folks in the room. So we had tremendous folks in the room and the energy was really strong. So we're really excited about Detroit.